My name is Leisha Emmons. I am Senior Vice President for Translational Research at Ankura Therapeutics, and I'm also the President for the Society for Immunotherapy of Cancer and the Chair of SITC's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. I'm the moderator of today's panel discussion. The purpose of today's listening session is to shed light on the professional and personal experiences of Hispanic and Latinx professionals in the scientific and medical research field. This panel features leaders representing various career levels and companies around the country. Although all of our panelists are currently working in industry, they've all also worked in academic environments and can speak to their experiences in both. We recognize that the Hispanic and Latinx cultures are varied and diverse, and that our panel does not represent each culture or each individual's experience within these categories. The comments made today are not meant to generalize or represent the entire experience of all Hispanic and Latinx professionals. SITC hopes today's panel is a contribution to efforts to share and appreciate the experiences of Hispanic and Latinx professionals and other underrepresented communities within the scientific field, as we seek to promote and enhance diversity in the clinical and biomedical research workforce. Now I'd like to ask each panelist to introduce yourself. First, Dr. Fernandez.
Hi, my name is Dr. Eileen Fernandez, and I am currently a molecular science liaison for Caris Life Sciences, and I cover Connecticut and Rhode Island. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Manjarres Orduño.
Hello, everyone. Natalie Manjarres Orduño. I am the global lead of the Organization for Latino Achievement at Bristol-Myers Squibb.
Dr. Ramirez Alejo.
Hi, my name is Noé Ramirez Alejo. I work as a senior principal scientist in the Translational Medicine Division at Bristol-Myers Squibb in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
And finally, Dr. Romero.
Hi, I'm Pedro Romero, Director of Medical and Scientific Affairs at Novigenics, a biomarker company in Lausanne, Switzerland, and this since last April. I'm also Professor Emeritus of the Faculty of Biology and Medicine of the University of Lausanne. And I was also the founding editor-in-chief of the Journal for Immunotherapy of Cancer. Happy to be here.
So first, I'd really like to thank you all for participating in today's panel discussion. These types of listening sessions have been very valuable and engaging, and I'd really like to thank you for being here and sharing your stories. First, we'll set the stage with some data, and then I'm going to ask you about your experiences. Based on the research that we've reviewed, we can see that despite the fact that Hispanic and Latinx folks represent about 18.9% of the US population, only 4.1% of doctoral degree recipients in the United States are of Hispanic or Latino ethnicity. Furthermore, when the Association of American Cancer Institute surveyed cancer centers in the US in the last year, of the centers that responded, they reported that only 7.3% of cancer center directors were Hispanic, 3.2% of deputy directors were Hispanic, 6.1% of associate directors were Hispanic, and 4.5% of research program leaders were Hispanic. So clearly there's a gross underrepresentation of Hispanic and Latinx professionals in science and medicine. I'd like to start this panel discussion by asking each of you to share your experiences in your professional journeys, and to share a bit about why you went into science and medicine and the challenges that you faced along your journey. We'll start with Dr. Romero.
Thanks, Aisha. Well, I was born to a family of first-generation urban settlers from farmer origins in a small town in the Colombian Andes. Given the notorious inequalities in the Colombian society, I was certainly not supposed to aspire to being a physician and even less a university professor. But I managed to get to medical school thanks to my parents, who migrated to the big city, Bogota, and to education opportunities granted by public school and university. So my dream was to train in nuclear physics. However, at the time of going to college, there was not even a single linear accelerator in the whole country. Therefore, I chose to study medicine, which I thought was a good compromise between science and social utility. Now, by the time I finished medical school, it was clear that my passion was scientific research in the medical space. So I started in a laboratory of immunology in Bogota, and soon launched, together with my mentor, a program in malaria vaccine development. The many ramifications of this program brought me in contact with Ruth Nosenzweig and Fidel Zavala, a couple of South American scientists. Ruth was the head of the Department of Medical and Molecular Parasitology, New York University School of Medicine. Now, what were the challenges through this journey to the postdoctoral stage level from a very provincial town in Colombia? Well, I would say first, research infrastructure in Colombia was and continues to be very underdeveloped. I remember we had to wash and reuse the plastic pipettes that were donated to us by friends in Europe and the United States. Getting reagents and equipment to the laboratory was challenging. The commercial barriers were such that most orders took months or even years to come. So to the point that we had a professional smuggler in the lab's payroll whose job was to clear reagents, enzymes, radioisotopes from customs within days of arriving. And you can imagine using, let's say, unconventional methods to do that. Now, the bright side of all those hardships is that you learn to be resourceful, to concoct local solutions with the limited resources at hand. For example, we devised our own blood drawing kits, which was makeshift. When we needed a particular kind of monkey to test malaria vaccine candidates, I actually traveled for a couple of months to the Amazon forest and set up a colony of Aorus trivigatus monkeys, starting from a collection campaign in the jungle and setting up the facilities in a city in the midst of the Amazon to host a colony of about 100 monkeys. Another big barrier in my experience was the language. So Colombia, as many South American countries, are even to this day over 95% of the population monolinguistic. So I had to learn English on the go, and arriving in New York, I spent the first 3 months suffering, literally suffering from the communication barrier, the challenge. And then probably the most daunting challenge in my personal journey is the enormous gap between the way science is made in a country like Colombia, the United States, or Western Europe. So it took me a big effort to overcome this underdog feeling, at the side of my peers and integrate as an equal member of the research community at NYU. Those are a few things that I can mention.
So thanks very much, Dr. Romero, for giving us some insights into the creative way that you had to proceed with your training and your scientific activities in Colombia. I wonder if you think there is some way that we can help address issues of communication. Perhaps you can keep that as something to talk about in the next session. Right. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Manjarres Orduño.
Hello, so I am also an immigrant scientist. I was born in Mexico, where I did all of my education from elementary school all to grad schools in the public Mexican system. I came to the US as a postdoc in working in immunology, which is my passion. And while working as a postdoc, I had the opportunity of really working on some very interesting projects in immuno-oncology. And it's through these very interesting projects, in immunogenomics. And it's through these very interesting projects in immunogenomics that I started to really see how most of the research that I was doing was in populations that are mostly European. I'm talking about the end of the 2000s. And I started to see like there weren't that many people like me in the lab, which I think is going to be a common experience. And I was thinking last night, it didn't even occur to me to think that there should be people like me in the lab. Once I went to a conference and a colleague of mine who happens to be African American told me, there is nobody who looks like me in this conference. And to me, it had never occurred that there should be people who look like me in a conference. That was the first time that it ever happened. But really what hit me was the great lack of genomic data on populations who were not European. If you consider that only 15% of the global population happens to be white, and at that time, probably 90% of the genomic data was only on European populations, that was a big hit for me. And it was when I started to really start to connect here and there with some people who were in the genomics community. Something that was very good in my career is that I had the opportunity to be in a great lab, and through that publish some good papers and aspire for an academic position in the US. So I applied for a K grant from the NIH, one of these transitions to independence program. And when I applied for that, I remember my review, the personal part of the review said, despite getting her education in Mexico, Dr. Manjaro Cerduño has a great resume. And I got the grant, I got the academic position, but it hit me that I didn't have that network within academia that could speak to my career, and that I will always be evaluated based on being this immigrant scientist. So shortly after that, I started to look for positions in industry, which is where I came here to work first in immunology directly, and then in immuno-oncology. I have been really fortunate that I got the opportunity to do science in pharma, working in a couple of drugs who have made it to patients, which is absolutely satisfying. And right now I'm in a position, in a temporary position, helping the company to set up their Latino and Hispanic strategy through the globe. And thankful for being here.
That's great. Thanks very much, Dr. Manjares Orduño. I wonder if you could comment on the differences that you feel in the academic setting where you started and in the industry setting where you are now.
Something that is very different is the regulations. When I was in academia, while there are plenty of regulations regarding how we protect our patients, how do we protect the confidentiality of the information, as a postdoc and even as a young faculty, I never felt that there were that many systems that protected me as a person and as a postdoc. It's not very clear because of the academic environment encourages so much to work and to be productive. It's not really clear, like, what are the things that you have the right to? When I started as a postdoc, and I'm aging myself here, but when I was started as a postdoc, in the two institutions where I worked, they weren't even postdoc societies. So that kind of tells you where we were at the time.
Thank you for those insights. Next, I'd like to hear from Dr. Ramirez Alejo.
Yes, thank you very much, Felicia. Yes, I was born in Mexico City. I was educated there as well, similar to Natalie's story. I was started from elementary school until grad school. After I obtained my PhD degree, I moved to New York City to Rockefeller University to work as a postdoc, which gave me a fantastic opportunity to expand my knowledge, acquire new skill sets. But similar to the story of Dr. Romero, I also faced the barrier language at the beginning, right? So it was a little bit challenging to communicate, to really, like be able to present or things like that. But I was very lucky in the context that there was some colleagues that also speak Spanish. Colleague from Spain, another colleague that was temporary there from Colombia, that I met previously from interactions and connections with the Latin American Society of Primary Immunodeficiencies. So I had the opportunity to learn from them, and also other fantastic colleagues that bear with me during my time learning how to communicate in English, and I also got out very good insights from them. In terms of how to be more direct and communicate better my thoughts, and make this transition through the barrier language. However, similar to what Dr. Manjarres mentioned, I noticed certain differences in our areas of how the lab manage the different postdocs that were there. So one example is that, for example, I was never allowed to attend to conferences, for example, to socialize my work or things like that. Whereas, for example, my other colleagues, they did have that opportunity, things like that. Also, probably as like a product of the barrier language, it was difficult to address, like from the beginning, like the things that Dr. Manjarres mentioned around, like understanding better our rights, like as postdocs, like what we should be doing, what not, where be, like entitled to do, or what we have basic right to do as well. But after that, after I completed my training there as a postdoc, I was able to publish different papers. I established different networks and collaborations, some very good friendships that stand until this day with some of my former colleagues. And then I started to decide what was my next step in my career. I was always, since I was in college, I was very curious about the pharma companies, like the industry. My journey back then was more towards the biology, but I was hoping that at some time during my career I was going to be able to get back to that particular point. And that's what I decided to do. I already had experienced the academic environment, and I was curious to expand my horizons towards the big pharma. So I was, interested in that. I applied to a position, and then that's how I transitioned into that, into industry, which also, allowed me to acquire a different skill sets than the ones that I had in academia, but use those ones as well to continue my career development, but now in a different environment. And yeah, that has been my journey so far.
And thank you very much for sharing your story with us. And similar to Dr. Manjarres, I'm wondering what types of differences you've experienced between your time in academia and your time in industry. For example, one thing I failed to ask Dr. Manjarres is if she saw more people that look like her in industry relative to academia. So perhaps you could address that. And then in general, just the differences between those two environments that you've experienced.
Yeah, regarding the like people like Latin American or Hispanic people that I had the opportunity to meet back then, I would say that I did not find those differences, because New York City being such a big city, it's very diverse. So there was a lot of people coming from different countries. So I met people from Argentina, from Colombia, people from Mexico as well. So in that particular regards, I did not observe that. Moving into industry has been also a similar experience. Probably again, in Boston area, which is also pretty diverse due to the high academic influx of people that comes for training, and similar in my current position. I work with people from Cuba, from Argentina as well. Mexico. So yeah, I would say that on that regard, I observe pretty much diversity. I cannot speak for other like institutions which have probably a different location where diversity is a little bit more restricted. But at least in my experience in academia and industry on that regard, like I haven't like observed a very drastic restriction or difference.
And then maybe I can give, thank you very much, Dr. Manjarres, a chance to answer that question as well. Have you in industry found more people that are like you than you did in academia?
I have to say that unfortunately, we still have long ways to go in industry to bring more people who are, Black, African American, Asian, Latino, or Hispanic. Definitely, there is a very concerted effort as an industry, and I need to say that because I'm actually part of those efforts. There's a really concerted effort to do that outreach, because something that happens as many opportunities, and I think Eileen may talk about it, is that sometimes we don't even know what is available. And for example, when I started looking for a position in industry, it had never occurred to me that it was something that I could do. The only path that I was always aware was academia. So I think there is also a matter of awareness of this as a possible career path.
For sure. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask Dr. Fernandez to tell us about her experiences.
Thank you, Dr. Emmons. So my journey starts back with cancer research. Actually, after high school, I had gone to community college. I'm a daughter of a single mother. She raised 2 kids on her own, worked multiple jobs, 3, 4 jobs at a time. This is not a story that only resonates with me, I'm sure. And the truth of the matter is I left high school, I couldn't afford to leave. So I ended up going to community college, and it ended up being a blessing. I got into this Bridges to Baccalaureate program that took me to the State University of New York at Purchase, which is this dancer school, but actually has a really good bio program. And because of that, I got my first experience with cancer research. I was there for a few years. I had to work 3 and 4 jobs every semester just to pay my way through. I graduated early because I just couldn't stand working 3 jobs at a time while I was in class taking crazy amount of credits. And more things happened in life, but I ended up actually getting into a Bridges to Doctorate program. And at that point, I was very gung-ho pre-med. I was like, maybe I'll do an MD PhD at that point, but I really thought I would be MD. And reflecting back, I think the reason is I was lucky that growing up, my doctor was a Peruvian male. So it was a man who spoke my language, who looked like people that were in my community. So I knew that was something that could happen, but I just had never even thought for a moment that I could maybe be a scientist, to be honest, or what that would even look like. I had never met anyone. With the Bridges to Doctorate program, I did a master's through the University of District of Columbia and Georgetown. There, I worked with the Latinx community down in DC, did a lot of volunteering with a survivor support group that's down there, including like giving talks in Spanish about BRCA 1 and BRCA 2. And that was very eye-opening. I had asked for help, obviously, because I was a master's student. So what was I really doing? But I remember a genetic counselor advising me and saying, well, those people are not going to be able to understand. They don't even have more than a high school education. So that's something that has really resonated with me as I've gone down through my career, because that's ridiculous. Like the amount of education you have doesn't actually amount to how intelligent you are. But from there, I ended up doing my PhD in tumor biology down in Georgetown, started a Women in Science and Education group with my friends. And then I went off to do a postdoc. I was at Yale in the Department of Pathology, doing biomarker discovery development work in the IO space, focusing in on non-small cell lung cancer. And while I was there, I did some more diversity, equity, inclusion type of work, where I started the Black Postdoc Association, co-founded with 2 other Black women. So I'm Afro-Latina, that's my identity. I also co-founded a racial justice subcommittee within the broader Postdoc Association. I should note that this was around May 2020 that this happened, where like there was this nationwide reckoning of what is actually happening in this country. So we sort of took advantage of that, to be honest, to be able to sort of push different initiatives where we were able to help others navigate through the system. Because when you're going through academia, it's known, like there's the leaky pipeline at the postdoc level. That's where you lose people. And I will say now I'm in industry, so that's where I got lost too. This is something that's just, in terms of challenges, as a postdoc and meeting other postdocs of color, has really helped me to have these conversations, having the YBPA and putting on different events and different seminars where we can sort of have these discussions has been really, really eye-opening for me. I didn't learn about imposter syndrome until I was in grad school. Grad school was the first time I saw a woman who was a woman of color as a scientist. There were so many times even in grad school where there was just this lack of protection there. There was particular bullies that were there. And, when I spoke up, because I would always speak up for others, when I spoke up for others and when I finally spoke up for myself, it was just like screaming into a void and nothing ever happened. There were situations where one particular teacher that I'm thinking about in grad school, where if you were not a white male or female, straight white male or female, he would knock off points off of your exams, which led to us getting the exams de-identified. Because I remember going and having the test for my friend who was a white female, straight white female. She's like, take my test with you. And I went to his office and I was like, well, it's the same exact answer. And he's like, oh, well, I'm not going to give you back the points. So this was just over and over again, sort of experiencing these things. And it's not something that's happening to me as like an island by myself. This is happening to so many people. I had in grad school, from master's to PhD, without giving identifying information, there was a professor who actually told the committee, and I learned this down the line, not to accept me because there's no way that I would graduate or succeed. Same thing, I was actually flirting with the idea of staying in academia. I'm very passionate about cancer health disparities, and I wanted to take sort of my bioinformatics and translational background and go back more into the translation, into the health disparities space as a faculty member. And different institutions that I was looking at, I ended up, it's a little bit more complicated, but there were things said such as, well, we can't just give you a job because you're Black, and we're setting you up for failure because in 2 years, what are you going to be able to do? You're not going to get promoted in 2 years, despite my CV. So that was one of the reasons that I felt the need to sort of leave academia and sort of start to heal myself a little bit, because I realized, and I think this can probably resonate with everyone on this call too, is that goalpost is always moving, and it just doesn't matter what you're doing unless you have a good support system, unless you have someone, good sponsorship and good mentorship and people really pulling you up, because you do need that support. You can't do it on your own. You need people who are rallying for you and championing you. And if you don't have that, there's just nowhere really to go. So for now, I'm in industry, and I do hope to get back into research, and I'm maybe reach out to some of my colleagues here for some advice. And that's a little bit about my journey there.
Yeah. Thanks very much for your honesty and telling us about the challenges that you faced. Just a quick question. You are an Afro-Latina, so that puts you into two different groups that are underrepresented. Do you think that that's more of a challenge for you, or do you find that it's an advantage to be potentially in both groups?
That's a really great question. I think I want to say it was a challenge until I recognized it. I didn't fully feel like myself as a scientist. The first time I even heard the term Afro-Latina was like 3 years ago. And I was like, oh, that's me. You can't see it right now, but I have like a little Afro. Like I'm African. I did the ancestry test. I'm like 49% African. And when I finally heard it, I was like, oh, I don't need to fit into a box, because Spanish is my first language, and I am Latina, and I am Dominican, and that is my culture, that is my ethnicity. But at the same time, I am Black. I've had situations throughout my entire life where I've been tried to put into boxes or told what I can and cannot be, but that's not who I am. I am who I am. I'm a New Yorker, first of all. That's my number one. I'm a Dominican, and I'm very proud of my heritage as well. So I don't love it when people do try to put me into boxes either, because I feel like it's an erasure of who I am. And just because I don't fit into a pretty box with a bow on it doesn't mean I'm not worthy and just as good as anyone else.
So thank you very much. That was a fantastic response. I would like to thank all of you for sharing more than a bit about your personal professional journeys. I think we all heard some resounding themes of resourcefulness, creativity, and resilience come through in your stories. We'd like to both shed light on the challenges faced by people in the Hispanic and Latinx communities, and also how we can all be better allies and advocates for individuals in those communities. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what each of you and what we as a community at large can do that will be impactful towards enacting change. I'd like to ask each of you to touch on some practical solutions that you think that either you or we as a community can employ. And we'll start with Dr. Fernandez. You're still on the screen. So what are your thoughts about this?
So I know that my colleagues are going to have really wonderful advice on this too. So I'm just going to stick to building community. I think something that's said a few times is like seeing people that look like you. And when you do have that community, I will say I was a Susan G. Komen scholar when I was in grad school. And I was a trainee in disparities research. So I was able to go every year to the AACR Health Disparities Conference. And that was when I felt the most, I would say, like just invigorated. It was because I was seeing people who were like me. I'm still friends with the people that I would see, and I still, stay in touch with them a few times a year. And we still support each other and throw each other's names into the hat, when there's different opportunities that present themselves. That's one of the things the YBPA afforded, and the Racial Justice Subcommittee as well, is really building a community of not only people who look like you, but who also sort of think like you as well. So like the allyship is so important, and really encouraging allies to speak up. We set up like bystander intervention trainings, those type of different trainings that you can do, because we're not taught how to interfere, right? We're not taught how to stand up for people. You can be upset and be like, wait, something's wrong with this, but it's scary because there's always a power imbalance often when you're seeing these things. So I think building those communities and supporting each other is a really great way to start.
That's terrific. I'd like to move on to Dr. Romero, and Dr. Romero, perhaps you can give us your thoughts about this and also touch on particularly how you think we might be able to mitigate the language barrier challenges more effectively for people trying to learn English when they first start their work in this country.
Thanks. So from my experience, I think it will help to promote the development of diasporas. I'm speaking from being an immigrant scientist in the States and then in Switzerland. Associations of Hispanic, Latin scientists that serve as a forum to spark dialogue among the members of the community, to create bridges to research institutions, to advocate for Hispanic Latino scientists in academic and political circles. I can give you an example from my experience. So in the early 90s, when I was establishing as a young independent researcher at the University Hospital of Lausanne here in Switzerland, internet was coming up and was revolutionizing the culture in unimagined ways. So for us, it helped to get free communications in the first place. It was very expensive to get on the phone or to talk overseas to our families. And so, but we did not stay there. We actually built a network of about 1,000 Colombian scientists spread around the world via an email list. And actually, the Ministry of Science and Education in Colombia seized on that resource and created what they call the Red Caldas, the network that functioned as a bridge with the Colombian research community, with the universities, and even with certain political institutions. We still have an association of that is called the Colombian, translated, the Association of Colombian Researchers in Switzerland, and we bring in not only Colombians but also Swiss. We are in love with Colombians, and we serve as vehicles to spread word about training or funding opportunities, put people in contact to initiate collaborations. We also organize meetings around topics of interest to the Colombian scientific community. So I think that CITSI, for instance, could help catalyze this type of associative life with the focus on the Hispanic Latino community. For instance, the society could support a campaign to create a Hispanic Latin committee with scientists established in the States, and together with CITSI members in the Latin American countries and in Spain. There are quite a few, and they are not particularly connected. And this kind of association could be the vehicle to spread all these education packages that the society produce, podcasts, even have regional meetings. And it's through these tools that the language barrier could be mitigated, because then you could bring English proficient speakers to these communities and expose them early on to educating in the scientific English scientific language at least, and socialize and so on and so on.
So that's a terrific suggestion. Thank you for your ideas about that. I'm hearing a pretty strong common theme of creating community, I think, so far. Next, I'd like to hear from Dr. Manjares Orduño. What are your thoughts?
Definitely community is a big part. And the thing that we need to remember is that why we need to create these communities and why it's important that we keep Latinos and Hispanic in academia, in industry, doing research and bringing even more. And is that at the end of the day, this is also about the patients who we serve. You know, the Society for Immunotherapy of Cancer is like really, really focused on bringing therapies. And everybody here talk about this additional emotional and mental load carrying as a Latino in academia. Imagine a patient. Imagine what a patient goes through. Eileen talked about having a doctor who speaks Spanish, but less than 7% of the physicians in the US are Latinos, and having that additional component for a patient put them at a disadvantage when it comes, talking about the Society of Immunotherapy and Cancer, through a diagnostic that is as complicated as that. And for me in particular, we need to remember that what we're doing is for patients. And for example, Eileen doing research in disparities in cancer research or in cancer outcomes. This is something that sometimes is not seen such as important part of the academic work, but it's done by these people. It's done by us because we do care, because it's our communities. I have been really fortunate that in the role that I'm doing, we just commissioned a study on the Latino patient journey to understand what are the issues that they go through. And it's completely different. We cannot extrapolate what we know from other communities into the Latino communities, because to start with, they are tremendously diverse. And we, at the end of the day, having these communities is what is going to allow us to bring more health equity to everybody. And also keeping these communities and keeping all this creativity is what is going to allow us to create better treatments for the patients. And that is for the benefit of everybody. I don't care if you are Latino or Hispanic or Afro-Latino, or, we all want to bring all the creativity that everybody with different life experiences. And we talk about resourcefulness, we talk about resilience, and that is what you want in science. So we need to keep them in here.
So that's great. Those are very valuable suggestions, and raises really important issues. I'm wondering if you think there are certain things that we as a community can do to help promote research into the biological basis of differential response based on the genetic background of different ethnicities, for example. It seems like there's not enough of that going on, which you brought up in the first part of this listening session. So I wonder what your thoughts are about that issue.
Yes, thank you for bringing that, Dr. Emmons. And something that is very important is that sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And if there are not people who look like us in the rooms where the grants are given and where the projects are designed, then we are missed out. Just yesterday, there was a study in Nature about the genetic makeup of the Mexican population. And it's a study that is small by the size of other genetic studies, but is the largest repository of genetic information of Latinos that is around now in the world. So that tells you how much work we still need to do and why it's so important that we keep doing it.
That's great. Thanks very much. And last but not least, I'd like to hear from Dr. Ramirez Alejo.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I would say that yeah, from my perspective, we can have this into groups. One thing is could be how could be helping or supporting the professional Latino, but also a little bit more along the lines that Dr. Natalie was mentioning. Like what can you do for the patients? And regarding the patients, something that comes to my mind immediately is just what happened to COVID, right? So there is a lot of misinformation. There was a lot of questions about, like whether vaccines were good or bad, whether things were good or bad, whether treatment were good or bad. So I think that's because, people in general community are not used to see, like scientific Latino scientists, like driving the science, generating this knowledge, socializing this knowledge. So having that visibility helps to the patients to rely more in science, more in the medicines, more in the treatments that are available to them, get close to their physicians, to ask questions, to try these, like new things. So I think that's important to bridge the gap that exists in between the misinformation that it's currently, like an epidemic as well in these days. You go to any platform and most of the things that you find there is that. So I think we as professional Latinos, we have a big responsibility on that end as well. Like make ourselves more visible and promote visibility for other colleagues so their work can be public, like can be to everybody, available to everybody, almost everybody. And that would be one of the key things, as we can also, like help to bring all these treatments or therapeutic opportunities to, like minorities or patients that are not fully aware or they just do not trust, like because of this misinformation or because, like they do not see people like them, like driving, and that reduces the confidence that they may have into this. So that's one thing. And the other thing, on the other side, like regarding the professionals, I totally agree with the points that were brought around, like promoting or championing association in the academic settings. I would say that things that can bring together people, like promote, like association for not only immigrants, scientists, like Dr. Romero, Dr. Maharis, or myself, but also having the opportunity to meet Latinos that grew up here, that have a better understanding in the system. I think that will help us also to understand better, like how to, like move our careers, move our journeys while we are here in our training phase. So getting interaction with other Latinos like Dr. Fernandez, who had a completely different journey than us, growing up here, different challenges. So that's also very important for us, like to enrich our experience here and bring communities coming from different angles together. That's something really important, and engage with community. At least something that we're trying to do here in industry, and particularly in the location where I am, is try to bridge with the community, like attending to schools that are, for which population is mostly Latino. In Cambridge, there are several options. So we go there, we engage with them, with high schoolers, with elementary kids, like just as work is an example for, like what you can aspire to be, like if you want to be a scientist as a Latino kid, it doesn't really matter your background. You can really do it. You can aspire to be a scientist if that's what drives you, if that's your interest. Is people like you in the real world. It doesn't have to come from a movie or a series or something like that. It's something that you can see. Like it's one of the parents your friends or of your classmates. So that community engagement helps a lot. So working with the local, like schools or local, like organizations to promote and spread the word. I think that's something that we can actively do. That's it. For example, you hosting this forum, I think that's a fantastic thing. So we can, like make or bring all these different points from the different perspectives into the table for conversation, discussion, and hopefully for follow-ups, down the road. But yeah, that would be, the two main takeaways that I would like to share with you guys in this discussion.
So that's great. I think you touched on community and also supporting young people moving into the field. So as a last thing, I'd like to come back to Dr. Fernandez, because you did a lot of work as you came up through the ranks in academia to try to build some community and support people. So I wonder what your thoughts are about the best way to support the pipeline to ensure diversity, particularly for folks of Hispanic and Latinx backgrounds, and also, African folks as well.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. One of the big things, thinking about academia specifically, is just how siloed everything is. So one of the biggest things, and one of the things I really tried to be, and a lot of people knew me. I always say it's because I'm nosy, but it's not that. It's just I've made it a point to go meet people and communicate with people, because everything's so siloed and separated. And I just don't believe in doing the same work twice. Like, why should these two separate groups be doing, like, if this group already created a whole framework for going out to the community and going out to speak to children in fourth grade, there was things, we brought science kits to kids, these type of things. These things already exist. So why is someone else going to go through the whole process of restarting it? So sort of trying to bridge those communications, I think is really, really vital in order to really get these communities sort of going. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
It's fine. So probably a mentorship program maybe would help as well, if you could pair young people with someone who's more established in the field, that has had experiences that they're likely to share. Maybe that could help, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think mentorship, I think importantly training the mentors though, because I've seen people who mean well and want to do well, but don't really know how to start. And then I see people who sort of put them down instead of giving them the tools or pushing them in the right direction. I think having mentorship training where you could be a little bit more culturally sensitive, there's mentors that I've seen who are excellent in so many ways, but then they'll say things to my colleagues who English is their second language, and they'll be like, oh, well, we just, we can't understand him. It's like, well, don't say that, because now you're saying that in front of all these trainees, and now these trainees are going to be saying that down the line, where like, that's not helpful in any way. And like, maybe I understand this person perfectly. So you're making a generalization about everyone, just based on your own biases, really. And I think really working on our biases is super, super important. One thing I do want to mention that I wanted to say before, I should have said before, but just thinking about what we can do. One of the themes we always hear, and I feel like I still hear it, is well, there's just no Black or Latinx people who are really great scientists. That's why we can't have these people come and talk and give. That's not true. We all know, everyone here definitely knows that's not true in any way, shape, or form. So I really do encourage individuals to speak up, societies, groups to invite people to speak who are not the typical like old white man. Not knocking them at all. They're brilliant. Some of them are brilliant too, not knocking them at all. But I think opening the doors and bringing other people who are doing the health disparities work, because there is sort of this like voodoo, this like bad juju around it, where you're not supposed to talk about it, and it's just not that good, and they're just not that smart. That's not true. It's just, this is something we're also very passionate about, and we're also very passionate about sharing the information with the community. So that doesn't make us less intelligent in any way, shape, or form, but really having more diversity in terms of who's up on the stage, I think would really go a long way.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So I think we're at time, and I would really like to thank you all for participating today and sharing your professional and personal experiences. It's been incredibly eye-opening, and I think we're taking away some things that we can do to make a difference. I think one major thing is broadening awareness, which hopefully this program will help in that regard. But there's more to do, I think, even beyond this. So I'd like to thank you for your other suggestions for how we can move the needle towards impactful change. I'd also like to thank all of our viewers, and I hope you found this panel discussion informative and enlightening. As we learned, there's still considerable room for progress to be made across the board, and I will make sure that SITC continues to identify avenues that bring new opportunities to further diversify the field, because that will only generate better outcomes for patients everywhere. We look forward to continuing these conversations in the future and hope that you will too within your own networks. So thank you all very much, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.